Say, pardon me, but could you help out a fellow American who's down on his luck?
Hit the road!
Mexico had just had one of the bloodiest revolutions in its history, with deaths tolling in the ballpark of 1 to 2 million. In a story of warlords, guerrillas, side-switching, plot twists, it was a big spectacle, the winners being the more liberal Republic side, which introduced things like the 8-hour workday. While there was this massive amount of violence and chaos, Mexico was booming as oil and other resources were being discovered constantly. This oil attracted many from all over the world. A lot of oil companies, American, Dutch, British, and a lot of people seeking their fortune. Many are just people down on their luck, looking to make some money. Some are criminals running away from their prosecution, but they are all looking to strike it big in a country who had just had a violent civil war, where despite the new republic, corruption is high, and all over the country, there are still hordes of bandits who would kill you for your boots. But many who come to find their fortune end up on the streets, begging for spare change until either more oil is discovered, where they'll be able to get some work, or try something different altogether. It's a boom and bust cycle. The longer the bust, the more desperate they become, and men who had pride may find themselves doing jobs they originally found too demeaning. This is the situation in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. The book was named by a mysterious figure called B. Travin. No one is really that certain on who he is. Some say it was writer Jack London, or the son of Kaiser Wilhelm II. There are many more practical theories. Some say it was two people, one who had experiences and one who could write, but it was never known for certain who wrote The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, or any of the other tales by B. Travin. This book fascinated John Huston, who wanted to make it shortly after his directorial debut, The Maltese Falcon, but World War II intervened, and he was called up into service while directing a World War II movie starring Bogart. In the army, he made a number of documentaries, some on the battlefield. Seeing these horrors, he came back to Hollywood and set about making Sierra Madre. Huston was a director ahead of his time, as he wanted to shoot his film on location in Mexico. Before the war, he may have been willing to shoot it on sets and lots, but his experience in the army made him crave more excitement, and just shooting on sterile sets wasn't doing it for him. He went location scouting for a while. While there, he attempted to meet the ever-elusive B. Travin. They set up a meeting, time and place, but Travin never showed up. One night, when Huston fell asleep in his hotel room, he woke up to see a small, thin man standing over him. This man handed him a card. It read Hal Croves, translator, and he was supposed to be representing B. Travin for the film and was hired on as a consultant. Huston and his crew thought this man to be B. Travin himself, but never knew for certain. The most credible theory on who B. Travin is that he was born in Brandenburg, modern-day Poland, under the name Hermann Albert Otto Maximilian Feige. He became an anarchist and edited a newspaper in Germany under the pseudonym Ret Marut. This got him in trouble with the authorities and he was sentenced to death. He escaped to London where he was captured and scheduled for deportation, but with some help from anarchist sympathizers was able to get to Mexico where he remained. The BBC did a documentary on the subject in the 70s. It's very thorough and on YouTube, so feel free to check it out. The film was made by a man who lived through the horrors of World War II and was written by a guy who had probably lived through a lot of what the people in the book lived through. It was a country that had been going through a lot of turmoil, same with the world, so it was going to be special. The Sierra Madre is a tale about three men prospecting for gold: Curtin, Howard, and Dobbs. Both versions start out with Dobbs panhandling because he's homeless.
Take a fellow American to a meal.
And immediately, you see the state of despair and desperation this character is in, not just on the page, but through Humphrey Bogart's stellar performance.
Try shining shoes in the street, peddling lemonade out of a bucket, and your hash is settled. You'll never get another job from an American.
Right out of the bat, you can tell that this isn't a standard Hollywood picture. Dobbs is having success with men in white suits, so he targets men with white suits. But lo and behold, it was the same guy he kept asking money for, and he is cut off.
This is the very last you get from me.
The man in the white suit is played by John Huston himself. This interaction functions as a metaphor for the oil and gold. They mine and drill until the resource is depleted, then they look somewhere else. Everyone is just looking for something to exploit until it's gone. In the book, Dobbs hooks up with a fellow American to look for a camp where they can get some work. A native tags along with them, and they have to climb a tree to escape a tiger. They get no work and have to return. The movie wisely cuts this part out and goes to when Dobbs is finally able to get a job, rigging up camps for oil drilling. McCormick, the guy who hires him, is a bit of a con man and uses many ways to persuade people to work for him and rip them off. In the book, he even espouses a communist viewpoint to get workers, mostly European, to work for him. He mostly tracks down desperate people and takes advantage of them, working them from sunrise to sunset in abysmal conditions, and weasels out of paying them. Dobbs meets Curtin on the oil rig in the book. In the movie, he meets him earlier, and they track McCormick down, wanting their wages. In the book, the guy gives them their money after he realizes it would be too much trouble to fight them. In the movie, and we get a fight that is well staged and very brutal, where they struggle immensely to beat him up and get their money. Houston, being an amateur boxer and having gotten into a few scrapes himself, knew what a fight looked like. Dobbs and Curtin decide that this way of living, waiting around for a job to appear, was no longer worth it. And what was the cheapest place to sleep, which was a big room of cots and plenty of scorpions and cockroaches, they meet a man named Howard, an older man full of wisdom and experience. He was a man who, like many in Tampico, got rich but lost most of it over time.
Never knew a prospector yet that died rich. Make one fortune, shoot a blow it in trying to find another. I'm no exception to the rule.
He then gives a monologue about the nature of gold and what it does to normal people, how it corrupts them and turns people against each other.
As long as there's no find, the noble brotherhood will last. But when the piles of gold begin to grow...
The book gives more lengthy anecdotes about this, one that is quite critical of the Spanish and Catholic Church exploiting the natives to mine the gold. But the mine is hard to maintain and the natives are quite resistant, so the mine is lost until being found by some American explorers who quickly turn against each other to hide the wealth from the others and even resort to violence. But despite the warning Howard gave, he's still willing to go on another expedition, mainly because he has nothing to lose. Maybe this time it will be different. Dobbs and Curtin also have nothing to lose and decide on prospecting. They decide to bring Howard along as his knowledge and experience will be handy, but they need some startup money. Howard has some, but more is needed on their end. Luckily, Dobbs gets lucky after a small percentage of a lottery ticket he bought from a young Robert Blake actually won. In the book, Curtin has a friend in town who struck it big and owes Curtin money, so Curtin is also able to make a sizable investment as well. But in the movie, it's just Howard and Dobbs. But Curtin still comes along, which will create tension later, an interesting choice by Houston. Another choice was the shootout on the train, which didn't happen in the book, but it's based on a real experience by Houston, who was on a train guarded by federal troops as they were traveling through bandit country, and he later learned that the last train to go through was raided, as well as the train that came after his. This shootout introduced the bandits into the movie, notably the one with the golden hat, who would become a reoccurring character in the movie, but not the book. Gold prospecting was a lot harder than Curtin and Dobbs expected, and the old man proved to be indispensable, actually knowing where to look, what it looked like, how to process it, and having a good stamina. The difficulty, of course, makes the other two question the purpose of the whole trip, and tensions start to rise, and we start to see the temper problem with Dobbs.
Shut up, or I'll smash your head flat!
But Howard puts them in their place when they have finally found a place teeming with gold, where the iconic prospecting jig is put on film. The film has an iconic cast, most notably, of course, Humphrey Bogart as Dobbs. Curtin was played by Tim Holtz, a lesser-known but still good actor. Howard was played by none other than Walter Houston, an actor with a lengthy career in stage and then film. He was also the father of John Huston, which must have been an interesting experience to direct your dad like that. It's like Scorsese with his parents, where they make a cameo, but instead of being one scene, it's most of the film. The performances are career-defining for about everyone in the cast, where Bogart plays a man who is desperate and defeated and just wants a little to get by.
I take only what I set out to get, even if there's still $500,000 worth lying around waiting to be picked up.
To one who becomes insanely greedy.
25,000, small potatoes.
How much do you say?
Oh, 50,000 anyway. 75 would be more like it.
To one who loses his sanity. His portrayal of a bum in the beginning really makes you feel that he's in this situation, and his transformation into insanity is quite believable. I give credit to the dirt on his face as well. Walter often stole the show with his performance, which is hard to do when you're acting against Bogart.
Shut up, or I'll smash your head flat! Go ahead, throw it. If you did, you'd never leave this wilderness alive.
Bogart took a risk in this role, as he usually played the hero, but in this film he plays the decent guy who becomes the sort of villain, which isn't a role a leading man like him typically takes, especially during the studio era. The structure is quite fascinating in the way the story shifts the perspective, from Dobbs in the beginning to Howard and Curtin at the end. It does mislead you in that way, as conventionally Dobbs would have been the hero from beginning to end, and someone like Curtin or Howard would have been the one to have gone mad. The film had a longer shoot than expected, mainly because of the location shooting, and probably because of Huston's perfectionism. The film went way over budget, which annoyed the Warner Brothers studio head Jack Warner, who remarked that when watching a scene of Dobbs looking for water, if he doesn't find water soon, I'll be broke. But despite his annoyance, Jack Warner let the film be completed without too much trouble, mainly because of his desire for prestige. As he didn't just want Warner to make money, of course he liked money, but to also get critical acclaim and awards. He also personally liked Huston. The film also wasn't just shot in Mexico. There was also a lot of shooting in Southern California and on studio sets. The film's longer than expected shoot also annoyed Bogart, who wanted to participate in a yacht race that was coming up, and he was afraid he was going to miss it. The tension between him and Huston came to a point in which Huston twisted Bogart's nose really hard. Bogart's wife, Lauren Bacall, said, "Stop, you're hurting him," to which Huston replied, "I know, I intend to." Bogart missed his race, but him and Huston made up and were still good friends. During the shoot, Huston met an orphan boy who he adopted, neglecting to tell his wife until after it happened. The three, Dobbs, Howard, Curtin, start mining for gold. It's hard work, but they start bringing the riches. Which then brings the question of division. Originally, they let Howard handle it, but decide to split it 3 ways. So there's no temptation for one of them to steal it all for themselves. So distrust is brewing among them. What doesn't help is that Dobbs gets caved in while mining, and Curtin rescues him. In the book, Dobbs is there for a while, and Curtin rescues him after he comes back from getting water. In the movie, Curtin is there immediately, but it's shown that he hesitates, thinking for a second that maybe he could split Dobbs' gold with Howard. This cave-in is not good for Dobbs, who becomes even more volatile, and shortly after this, a man named LeCowd in the book. In the movie, Cody comes along. LeCowd saw Curtin in town getting supplies, asked to camp with him. Curtin said no, and then LeCowd followed Curtin back to the camp, which brings an interesting moral dilemma for the three, as they're afraid he could alert the authorities on what they're doing, which could get them in trouble, as they didn't get a permit. Which they could have, but if they did, it would open them up to corrupt bureaucrats stealing their load. They could bring LeCowd in, but that shrinks their share. They could kill him and make it look like an accident, which Dobbs is for, but they're not too happy about. They try to make him think that they're hunting for hides, but he doesn't buy it, so it really only gives them the 2 options. Let him in or do him in. Now the book and movie differ greatly on this. In the book, they don't really ever seriously consider killing LeCowd. Howard is against it, and only really Dobbs is in favor. In the movie, they take a vote, where Dobbs and Curtin vote to kill him. The only thing that stops him is the arrival of the bandits. And instead of killing Cody, they team up with him to hold the bandits back. In the book, LeCowd recounts a tale of these bandits and the crimes they commit, the main one being a train robbery, in which they kill about 20 people. So the book does explain to you how evil these bandits are. The book even tells us what they want to do to the hunter they are planning to rob for ammunition. So they began to think about the gringo, to get him alive by any means and then make him the object of their enjoyment. They would begin by putting little pieces of embers in his mouth and watching him make funny faces. After this, there were more refined ways by which to obtain pleasure during the next 24 hours. The victim usually does not like them. He may die too soon. So every kind of precaution has to be taken to make the entertainment last as long as possible. But the movie does show them as menacing, especially the gold hat with the iconic badges line.
Badges? We ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges.
Both the movie and the book do have a tense standoff, with some shooting until the 4 are saved by the federales. But in the book, LeCowd survives. In the movie, he doesn't. I'm not sure how I feel about the change, because the character is barely in the movie, but he's not too much of a character in the book either. He just wants to stick around and look for gold somewhere else in the area, representing someone who thinks there's more riches when there not necessarily is. Poor feller he is, Howard said. He's cracked somehow. He hasn't got all his screws tight. That much is sure. I think he's an eternal. An eternal? What do you mean? Curtin was curious. An eternal prospector. He can stay for 10 years at the same place, digging and digging, convinced that he is on the right spot, and that there can be no mistake about it, and that all he needs is patience. He is sure that someday he will make the big hit. The 3 leave to go back to civilization, where they can cash in their riches for money, and live more comfortably. But they're stopped by some natives who want them to try to save the life of a boy who fell in the water and has been unconscious. Howard offers to look at the boy and is successful. As a result, he has to live with the Indians in the village and be treated with luxury. The others take Howard's gold, saying the villagers might forget his kind deed and do him in. Along with Howard's other things, the two journey out. But not too much longer. Without Howard, Dobbs starts losing it more and more. It's funny to hear Dobbs warn Howard about the villagers forgetting the deed he did them if they found he had gold, when that's exactly what he does with Curtin. Dobbs wants to split Howard's gold, but Curtin won't let him. And Dobbs accuses Curtin of wanting to take it all for himself. This whole scenario ends with Curtin having to guard Dobbs 24/7, which isn't that feasible as he has to sleep at some point, and he does, where Dobbs takes advantage and shoots him twice, completely forgetting the time Curtin saved his life in the cave-in.
I owe my life to you, partner.
Forget it.
Dobbs, of course, gets more and more insane.
If you believe you got a conscience, it'll pester you to death.
He gets close to the city where he would sell some stuff for money, but is stalked by bandits with raggy clothing. In the movie, it's Golden Hat. In the book, they're just some random bandits. Dobbs gets beheaded with a machete, and his goods are stolen. The bandits see the bags of gold, but they don't know what they are. They come to the conclusion that it was a dirty trick to add weight to the hides for a higher price, and they just dump them out. Bandits are caught when trying to sell the donkeys, and we see a sequence entirely in Spanish without subtitles of the bandits getting caught, having the viewer rely on visual cues. Curtin survives being shot, and Howard is living it up in the little village, even though in the book, he's doing more work as a witch doctor. They hear about the bandits and Dobbs, and try to recover the gold, but find that it's been thrown away, which leads to Howard having a good laugh at the comical irony of the situation. They did all that back-breaking labor for it to just be thrown away. And everyone joins in. In the book, they actually find some gold that the bandits didn't throw out, and Howard decides to stay in the village anyways, while Curtin sets off. In the movie, there's no such luck for Curtin, but he ultimately decides to go back home. The story is ultimately about greed and what it does to people, and how it can put people in desperate situations. It shows the oil booms and busts in Mexico, which seem to be a metaphor for the stock market, which has booms and bust cycles. In the book, it's more apparent with this as Traven was very critical of systems like capitalism and the Catholic Church, and it really glorified the natives of Mexico and the simple life they led. The quote in the beginning of the book is, "The treasure which you not think worth taking trouble and pains to find, this one alone is the real treasure you are longing for all your life. The glittering treasure you are hunting for day and night lies buried on the other side of that hill yonder," which is self-explanatory. It's just proclaiming modesty and is almost Buddhist in the sense that wanting things brings you pain. The book and movie are both complex and interesting tales, both worth exploring. It's my favorite Huston film, and he's done a lot of good stuff, especially with Bogart. Those two had a relationship like Scorsese and De Niro later had, and made a string of great films. The film was loved by critics and the Academy, where John and Walter both won Oscars as a father and son duo, but it had a more lukewarm reception with audiences at the time. Because Bogart is kind of a villain in the film, and it's just because of the film's dark nature as well. This film was released 3 years after World War II, and people might have been looking for more lighter fare. But this film is considered one of the best of all time, and for good reason. It's one that feels incredibly authentic with its atmosphere, performances, and writing, and there really isn't a dull moment in the film at all. It's a film that reminds me how good the films in the black and white era were, especially today where everyone glorifies New Hollywood as the pinnacle of cinema, and it was a good era. And I'm not knocking those films at all, but it's called the Golden Age of Hollywood for a reason.